Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. There's something wrong somewhere when recent college grads are carrying college loan debt averaging close to $30,000 each, yet some research suggests that as many as 43% of them may have difficulty finding a job that launches them into the lives for which they studied and prepared. Even with today's historically low unemployment rates, too many have had to accept a full-time job not in their field of study, or one that's at such low level it doesn't use what they worked so hard to learn. The recent grads who entered the workforce in 2019 with college loan debt are part of the 45 million borrowers that have taken the nation to its highest ever level of student loan debt, $1.5 trillion, according to Forbes magazine. These new grads experience underemployment, can feel discouraged, ashamed, and frustrated about not moving forward toward the life and career for which they have prepared. Having their student loan paybacks kick in just adds to their despair. These challenges may lead to a crisis of faith in seeing how God works when it's difficult to make your path in life and your profession. After experiencing both their own career challenges and success, and then raising and launching 4 daughters, Philip and Elizabeth Bruns realized they had developed some personal expertise that could help others with career planning and life transition. They created some training sessions on the topics of building a strong foundation in God, embracing God-given gifts and talents, and formulating a strategy to approach job searching and career building. They gave their seminars at their church and then to broader audience, and they began to catch a vision for a new ministry that would help people at different life stages to achieve their God-given potential. Philip and Elizabeth Bruns live and serve their church in the Cincinnati area, where he is a real estate developer and writer, and she's a senior research scientist for a major consumer products company. Here to talk about their new book, Launch Your Life, Creating a Life in Service to God, is Philip Bruns. Philip, welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth.
Rabbi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here, and I love the Cincinnati area. I was actually the Wrangler jeans salesman in Western Ohio, based out of Columbus, working the whole western side into Cincinnati. So I'm a Skyline Chili fan and a Grater's ice cream fan.
Well, you're probably better for that.
There you go. Philip, it's very interesting, your own journey, and that's where we want to start, because that's the foundation of your understanding, and then looking to take the biblical worldview, the believer's lens, to what people would think is the capitalistic economy that we live in, and is there an approach that can be used, which is looking at the gifts God has given you, not through a spiritual gifts inventory, but actually taking a look at God-given talents and skill sets, and picking up things along the way that build a portfolio, almost as what we used to call as a skills merchant. Fancy name for a job hopper, all right, was somebody who went along and gathered up a bunch of different skills to become more effective. So take us back to even before your marriage, to your young life, what your faith journey was, and what your vision for your career was, and what you found in that pursuit that wound up leading you and your wife to then come up with this approach, which is now a good focal point of both your activity as a real estate agent and a quote-unquote career counselor.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both Beth and I, and she so wanted to be here today, but was not able to. But our paths are a little bit different from one another. They're both similar in the sense that we grew up, and we're so grateful for our parents giving us a foundation, both in the Bible and in God and so forth, and a real foundation of faith. But I think both of us, and I think so many students today, they kind of lose their way in that when you go to college and go away from home and so forth, and both of us through different ways were invited out to a Bible discussion group in the campuses where we were at. We didn't know each other at the time, and for me, I was invited out by another student, and it took me about 5 or 6 weeks to decide to go, but then I went, and having that base that I mentioned from our parents was very helpful, because as we went to this Bible talk, I believed in the Bible, I believed in God, but my faith had really wandered. And the discussion, I forget the exact topic what it was, but I started to study the Bible individually with the person that had been leading it there, and really discovered that the Bible was not a book just to review on a Sunday morning or to read as a good book on the side, but actually applicable to my life 2,000 years after it was written. And once I was able to figure that out, there was the stories of the Old Testament stories or the New Testament stories really hit me much differently than they had in the past. They were much more applicable to my life. And then at some point, a couple months later, I suppose, really wanted to make Jesus my Lord and become a Christian, and so that was the foundation. At the same time, I was in school and I had no idea what I was doing. I had started at a pretty large university, and I had no major. I was undecided. And I tried a number of different things and wasn't doing very well academically. And I transferred to a smaller school, community college, and studied architecture for a little while. And then eventually transferred to, again, a third school, where then I ended up getting my 2-year degree there. So it took me a number of years and a couple of transfers to get to an associate degree. And it's not necessarily the way that would be a prototype for a student to go into school and to meander their way through several years of school for that. My wife, on the other hand, she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She went into school, chemical engineering, and she graduated on time, and she was in a 5-year program, graduated on time, and started working for a major company. It was when she graduated is actually when we first met. And I was still working my way through school yet, and so it was not a very straight path for me. And what helps us today is there's students on both sides of the coin. There's some that are better knowing what they want to do to go into school, what they want to study, and getting the job on the back end. Conversely, there's a whole lot of students that really have no idea and kind of get lost in the shuffle of major universities, of what do I want to do when I grow up, and so it's looking back, I feel like God was working in both of our lives, to eventually bring us together and to be able to offer our experiences to a breadth of students today. But I think that through that, I grew a lot during that time. We eventually we got married, but even when I did graduate with my degree, Rabbi, I spent 3 years doing 3 different jobs. I was in the construction world. I ended up with a construction management degree, which was very fitting for how I grew up and my skill set, talents, and interests, and all of that. But I would work for a year. My first job was working on a high-rise building in Chicago, and building got done, and then there was no next building. And this was in the early 90s, which there was a slowdown in the economy at that time. And then I had 2 temp jobs in the years after that before I was able to obtain a job then, which I would have for like 20 years, working for a company and really blessed with some success with that. But so it has been an interesting journey that helps us today to understand the struggles that students have today.
Well, it's a very interesting. I'm more relate to you as I went to college at 16. only by an unusual set of circumstances. It had nothing to do with, oh, he's a whiz kid and stuff like that. The prep school that I was going to went bankrupt, and the state of Massachusetts said that everyone who has acquired this many credits or more, you will have to give them a diploma under mandate by the Department of Education of the state of Massachusetts. So I was given my high school diploma without having completed high school, and applied to, I was from Pittsburgh, and this was in Massachusetts, and I applied to Penn State. I hadn't talked to my parents about it, but I didn't want to go home. I had been away from home. So I went and applied to Penn State, and they thought it was very impressive that at this young age I had graduated, and they didn't know any of the circumstances, and they accepted me. So I went to my freshman year at age 16. I knew nothing. Wow. Never had a counselor, never had a guidance counselor. Took a lot of courses that I really liked, I really enjoyed, and had absolutely no background for anything. I had graduate credits in sociology and political science and psychology, and finally I had no prerequisites done, and they said, you know, you've got like 135 credits, but you meet the threshold for the number of credits, but you have no major. So they worked it out where I could spend one more year in the School of Education and get a Bachelor of Science in Education, and did my student teaching in kindergarten. Hated it. $500 a month was my starting salary. Hated it. So I had an opportunity to go into sales and stayed in sales for most of my life. But that lack of guidance was, you went from opportunity to, and in being a traveling salesperson, you make your own opportunities. So you become very independent. But I didn't go back to school until I was 55, because now I had a calling, and so I did my postgraduate work in Jewish studies and first century Jewish studies to go into full-time ministry. And so it took from age 16 to age 55 for me to have a vision. The whole time I was very successful in the corporate positions that I held with AT&T and Hewlett-Packard, and in the staffing industry. But I completely relate with your story that it's almost a pinball kind of existence. Is you bounce around for a while till you hit the flipper, and then you go back up there and bounce around again. And here you had this. Now you had come to faith. Grew up in a faith-based home. Yes.
Oh yes.
Okay. And what about Beth?
Yeah, we're very similar backgrounds. We grew up in small towns in Northwest Ohio, and both grew up in. We're very fortunate, very grateful for our parents. Our parents were. We've lost both of our dads, but they were both married for many, many years, and a very traditional family, if you will, where God was very important for us, and it really helps us as a foundation now for this work, I feel. And in talking your story and as my story, it's very common today. The additional challenge is the amount of debt that students that some students find themselves in, and you throw that on top of the navigating waters where they're not sure of what their major should be, or not sure of what job they should look for, not sure how to look for a job or how to put together a really good resume. Those things aren't always obvious when they can't figure it out, or they're moving slow or get kind of stuck. you mentioned it earlier. You can kind of lose your faith in God. You can kind of lose your faith in yourself, and it's just kind of a downward spiral sometimes. And so we try to help students to keep moving forward. That's one of our favorite things is just to keep moving forward. But yeah, it is that background that you talked about yourself, and for myself, you just had to keep moving forward. That I knew when I was young, and fortunately for me, sure for you, but for me, one of the things that when I finally did graduate, Beth and I got married. I think I owed a friend of mine somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,200, and that was the only student debt that I had had. I had been working my way through school that whole time, and sometimes today we're talking to students, some of which are six figures in debt, graduating with a degree that they don't like, not sure what to do with it, and it's just your heart just sinks because that's a whole lot of money.
As you looked at your relationship with Beth, here she was laser focused, she had a clear path, and you were more of a Renaissance man than a clear visionary. Was that a struggle for you personally as you saw the clarity in which your wife had and the focus that she had? Did it invoke doubt in you? Did you feel as the man that here she had this clear road and you were, I don't want to call it floundering, but you didn't have the clarity and the clear direction that she had, but yet you were joined together, and there had to be, and this is a part of our faith journey, that if we don't bring it out, there is the man's psyche, there is the man's provider, protector kind of thing, and when we're not in that role, because we tend to define ourselves by what we do, and we're married to somebody who is strong and convicted, and we feel that tension, and maybe they don't feel it at all, but we think they feel it. We impose it upon them. We kind of take on the mantle of well, she must not think much of me because I did that one job in Chicago, and then what am I going to do next? What is she going to? And all along, not having a way to communicate with her, not knowing the right way or the best way, you may carry a certain amount of guilt or a certain amount of, and that's a part of the dynamic of these young millennials getting married, and one of them having a job or a career path, and one of them not, and the great unifier, of course, is the relationship with God. That makes that narrative not happen. That it's more of a I don't want to call it a partnership, but it's more of a unity and the compounding of one as it was supposed to be than it is I have to perform in order to impress my wife that I have clarity. And I think sometimes it's harder for the men in this position than it is for the woman in the position. She's okay with the husband having clarity, and he's okay with her kind of bouncing around as she will. But in the reverse situation, she may be just fine with it, but he's not fine with it. And so in his insecurity, there's a little bit of a rub because he's reactionary, thinking that whatever she says to him, he's going to respond from a defensive position because he's prepared to, because he doesn't feel good about himself.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I would start with this. Beth is like a totally amazing woman. And when I very vividly remember, in fact, we were just talking recently on our first date, when I asked her out on a date, she honestly thought I was just doing her a favor. Because for her, when she had gone on a few dates before that, some of the guys were actually fairly intimidated. As you might imagine, Beth she's very bright, very smart, and she's in a senior leadership position now, and is responsible for a whole, lot of dollars and cents and people and products, and she's just done really amazing for herself in her career. But when I went out, when I asked her on a date, I was genuinely interested. So she thought I was doing her a favor just being friendly. And I thought, oh, I think she's kind of cute. And so we went on our date. And, I'll tell you, we never, I kind of joke with her now because I actually had two, her and then there was another person that I knew that I was interested at some point taking on a date. But after we went on our first date, neither of us went on another date with anybody else again. And so we attracted to each other very, very quickly. And I think what attracted me to her were in her past experiences, where she had intimidated guys a bit with her for lack of a better term, her brightness or sharpness. I found it very attractive, and I thought, wow, she can really help me. And she really loved her God, and so that was very attractive. And she was very devoted to doing a good job with her employment, with her work. And so all that was very attractive to me. And so when we got married, it was actually I had actually not finished my degree yet. I was getting very close, but I for my end, I had gotten a part-time job. I'm sorry, take it back. I had gotten a job, and it was working on that building in Chicago, ironically. But I had no money. I had no debt. That was a good thing. But I had to save some money to go buy a car. That was step one, and then save some more money to go buy her a ring. And so she married me as she saw me with a lot of potential, she would say. And when I look at her, I look at, think that I married up. And so she's an amazing woman, and we've had an amazing lives together. We've been married for 28 and a half years now. And we're so very excited. You mentioned earlier we have the 4 daughters, which they're doing just totally amazing. Through that, we've been able to help each other. And there's been times where she's been down with work or down with just life in general. Sometimes deals, hardships, and I've been able to be there to pick her up, and her conversely to me. I think more specifically to what you spoke about, there's certainly times that I've had my moments of insecurity, moments of I'm just not that. I'm something less than what she is. She has always been very reassuring that she believes in me, and that she reminds me of my talents. I do actually have a lot of talents that she doesn't have, and so we complement each other very well. My talents when I was 20 years old or so wasn't necessarily knowing exactly what I wanted to do and going to do that. I was right. Trying to figure all that out. But I've grown a lot in that, and she's grown in a lot in her weaknesses as well. And so every now and then I have conversations. Guys come up to me and ask me about exactly what you're talking about. Recently, I had a young man ask me about. He was dating this other young lady, but she was very similar. She had a job that she was making a lot more money than he was, and he was a bit insecure about that. In fact, he told me later that he had a bunch of friends tell him, like, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't marry into a situation where I'm making less money than the wife. And I looked at him and I said, well, that was like the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. For me, I can understand that security, but I think as guys, sometimes we just got to get over ourselves. And either our paycheck is something that we have accomplished ourselves, or we can look at it as a gift from God. The talents that we have, the skill sets, the job, the employment that we have actually is a gift from God, which is a way that Beth and I choose to look at our careers and look at our money and so forth. we look at it as a gift from God. So whether she brought in $2 and I brought in $1, or if I bring in $2 and she brings in $1, it doesn't really matter. We get $3 from God. And so that's the way we've looked at it. And I think sometimes in my moments of insecurity or my sinful nature and so forth, I can get insecure about that. But I think that in my right mind, we look at it that, you know, God has blessed us with those $3. God has blessed us with our talents. God has blessed us with our marriage. And we really think about the Ecclesiastes 4 scripture, where it's the cord of three stands of God and Beth and myself. And so we've always looked at our marriage like that, and that's really been a foundation, if you will, to be able to navigate any of those insecurities that both of us have.
You know, we look at the Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah.
We seldom, if ever, talk about the Proverbs 31 man that she was married to.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, who made more money? Did the Proverbs 31 woman make more money than the Proverbs 31 man? Because it talked about her getting up early and then going out to work. And she was esteemed in the city. That might imply that she was making more money than her husband. Don't know. We don't know the background to the story, but we know that we are in pursuit of this Proverbs 31 woman. We want her to be esteemed in the city. Her children call her blessed. We want her to be productive and a contributor. And that might even include her earning more money than her husband. And maybe if we looked at the Proverbs 31 story a little bit closer, we might be able to look at that and ascertain that she was a strong contributor to the family unit, and she was edified and lifted up. He wasn't mentioned all that much. There's a new book out called In Search of the Proverbs 31 Man. Finally, somebody's realized that in order to have a Proverbs 31 wife, you need to be a Proverbs 31 man and be comfortable in your gifting and comfortable in yourself, so that you don't sit in the shadow and she doesn't sit in your shadow, that there is a balance that has to be struck. We're talking with Philip Bruns. He and his wife authored Launch Your Life, Creating a Life in Service of God, and they also have a companion workbook, the Launch Your Life Action Planner, that lays out a clear path for assessing God's gift to you and how you might be able to embrace a path to prospering in the gifts that God has given you in this complex world we live in the employment field, in the vocational field. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into the text of creating a life in service to God in Launch Your Life with Philip Bruns. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitenationcom. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitenationcom/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings
take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitenationcom to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitenationcom and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitenationcom/events.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Philip Bruns, who he and his wife Elizabeth, or Beth, authored a book called Launch Your Life, Creating a Life in Service of God. Philip, welcome back to the program.
Thanks again for having me.
So the theme of the book, Launch Your Life, Creating a Life in Service of God, puts God at the center, as he should be, of marriage, which is the calling. For this reason a man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and they will become one. Then the next order is God first, then my wife, then my children, then my work, or my church and my work. You can alternate those two, but there's an order, there's a hierarchy of what God wants you to place your importance. And so the job is in that top 5 of the order of priorities in life. And so it consumes more time than we spend with our kids during the work week. But how do we shift the focus from I'm going to focus on the job I'm going to go after, to how I approach what I do in the lens of how do I glorify God in what I'm doing, and therefore I will then receive more than a paycheck, more than being defined by the name on my business card, but I'm in service, whether or not it's marketplace ministry of lunch with the guys on the floor and inserting or opening up in a word of prayer, or being like I was as a senior manager, director with Hewlett Packard, saying, I won't stay in the same hotel as my female employees. I won't fly on the same flights with my female employees. And you'll never see me come down the elevator of a hotel with my female subordinate employees, because that's the appearance of wrongdoing. It might be somebody sees that and says, oh, he's got something going on, they're coming down the elevator together. Well, you know, that's a real circumstance, but I told our travel department, I said, you do not schedule me to be at the same hotels and to schedule the same flights. I'm not going to travel with my female staff. And that was after I became a believer. Right? I began to understand what it meant to weave this into my lifestyle as a believer in my position. How do you navigate and guide this younger generation to see the larger purpose in their giftings, abilities, while they're pursuing the paying off of student loans and the weight of the debt, that there is something glorious and honorable in all of this that it's much bigger than just the job and the student loan itself?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. We really start in the book about having a foundation in God. And it's the simple things of reading and studying your Bible, spending time in prayer, and having a personal ministry. We call it in the book, your foundation formula. When you think about the building you're sitting in, or that I'm sitting in now, or any of your watchers are sitting in, we're not even thinking about the foundation. We're not thinking about, oh my goodness, is this building going to stand up or not? You're sitting in a very firm chair, firm foundation. It's not going to fall. You don't even think about it. And that should be the same way for us spiritually, is that we have a firm foundation of God, and really those three aspects. And so we really try to help younger people, and honestly older people. I mean, sometimes life gets the best of us, and we forget some of those things, because at the same time, Rabbi, and I'm sure you've seen it, I've seen it, I've experienced it, we've got an enemy that is trying to destroy all of that. Through one way, through another way, through lying, through deceit. We've got an enemy that is trying to separate us from our God. We got an enemy that's trying to lie to us and tell us that we're not so much, and trying to discourage us and so forth. And so that's why we need that very firm foundation. So we start with that. And but I think one of the schemes, honestly, that I feels like I've come to discover in myself and see in others, is that all those things you mentioned, your work, your children, this responsibility, that responsibility, are all in conflict against our relationship with God, or in conflict with our church time. And so if we divided it into a pie chart, we have this little slice here for church, this little slice here for my spouse, this slice here for child number 1 and child number 2, and so forth, and all the responsibilities that we have. And again, I think one of the schemes that our enemy uses is to try to combat those against each other. One of the things that we really tried to present in the Launch Your Life book, and thus a subtitle of Creating a Life in the Service of God, is that God is not just interested on our 2 hours on Sunday morning, or our 1 hour of Bible study during the week, that God actually looks at all of that as our life, and God desires all of that. And that's when we get into biblical characters that even someone who's not that familiar with the Bible, or just vaguely familiar with it, may know a story of Joseph, or may have heard of Nehemiah, or we talked earlier about the Proverbs 31 woman. We get into their lives, and very easily you see, like, wow, God really did use all of their life for his service, and that includes their work, included their job. And it's very interesting when you start looking at these people, biblical people, just like real people. They had good days on their job, they had bad days, they had people that were probably good coworkers, and they had coworkers, for some of them, that were just trying to undermine them and do bad things to them. And so when you look at it, these are people that experience the same thing that you and I and people all around us experience day to day at work or at school or whatever life stage that we're at. But yet when we look at how God used them, it was God using them in their full lives of being a parent. Proverbs 31 woman we mentioned earlier, in her marriage, but also in their work. And so, in fact, these things don't actually compete against each other, but God is trying to work in our lives through all of those things, including our day job, or if we're in university, our classes. Sometimes we don't know what God is trying to do, but one thing that we can be assured of, that God is using us in our whole lives, and he cares about our full lives. Not just, again, it's not that couple hours on a Sunday morning.
It's interesting in the description of a couple of areas. I remember always being asked the question, where do you want to be in 5 years? Every interview, where do you want to be in 5 years? And I would answer the question and say, where do you want to be in 5 years? Because I'm going to be the guy pushing you up and pushing you up and pushing you up, and filling in behind you as you climb that ladder. So you can turn to me and look to me to be the guy pushing you up and advancing you. So no, I've got your back. Right? I don't need to know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I need to know where you're going to be in 5 years, because I'm going to be one step below you, just like I'm coming in today. Well, I always got the job because that was the golden answer. Well, the Bible says to esteem the other more than yourself. We read that 6 things God hates, 7 are an abomination. Seeds of discord being the seventh one, is that these ideas of how we treat one another, this ministry of one anothering, applies to the corporate world. And if we carried it over, instead of just our journey with fellow believers, into our jobs, and we apply those principles in the workplace, we would find that godly attitude, that godly spirit, that Christ-like behavior is going to advance us. And the truth of the matter is, it's not the most qualified person that gets the promotion. It's not. It rarely is the most qualified person who gets the promotion. It's always the person who the boss likes, right, and feels fits and is not in conflict and will augment them or lift them up. Isn't that the job of a believer in service to God, is to raise, to let no unwholesome talk come from your mouth, but only for that which is the encouragement of another and for those within the hearing? Isn't that what we're supposed to be? And part of the challenge is that we become lukewarm in our faith and fearful. And so you can no longer really distinguish who is a believer and who's not a believer when you're in the marketplace. But we should be able to recognize attributes and say, you know, there's really something special about that Bruns guy. You know, he's always helping somebody else out. He's always the first one to volunteer to help, not volunteer to lead, not to be the top guy. He's always willing to be a team player. He's always willing to take on the tough assignment, maybe the one that's not the glory, but the one that needs to be done. That's the one that gains favor, and with favor comes access. And that's in service to God. That's not self-serving, which is what we think climbing the corporate ladder has to be self-serving. I grew up in the days of gamesmanship. Right? In the 70s, it was all about climbing the corporate ladder as a gamesman. Okay? How could you leverage this relationship, put your foot on this person's back, and leapfrog over them using gamesmanship to advance your career, and you would leave a body count behind you for the next 20 years. That dynamic has changed. People this new generation cares more for each other than we were raised in the corporate world to care for each other. And that's not always an attribute that's going to bring about career advancement, because they're looking for that more aggressive. It's hard to strike that balance. So how do you help? What tools do you give the young, the old, the middle-aged, who's either he's in a mental transition period or he's in an actual career transition period, or thinking about making a move? What tools do you give them in the examples of, let's say, David and Goliath?
You know, you bring up a number of great points. I think that specific to David and Goliath, one of the great things when you look at David that we talk about in the Launch Your Life book is how God had prepared him. David, at some point, if you read in 1 Samuel 17, at some point he's a young boy and he runs into a bear while taking care of some sheep. And somehow, some way, he wrestles this bear and he kills the bear. On another day, he runs into a lion and has the same thing. He's got to either kill this lion, or maybe his life, it seems, would be very understandable. His own life was being threatened as well, but he kills this lion. And of course, he grows up the youngest of several other young men in this family of Jesse. And so instead of looking at himself as a poor, lowly, dumb shepherd boy who barely survived these horrible days with the bear and with the lion, instead of looking like that in a more negative way, in 1 Samuel 17, we see him standing in front of Saul. And he's got Saul, he's got the Israelite army sitting there, and he's got his brothers. And they were all, Saul is like totally not believing him. His brothers are giving him a hard time for being there. And the Israelite army is all looking at each other, and nobody is sitting there looking at the Philistines and trying to go beat the Philistines, who, of course, is led by Goliath. And David reasons with Saul, the king of the Israelites at the time. He reasons with them that day that I fought the lion, the day that I fought the bear, you know what? Those were God preparing me for now Goliath in front of us. And David totally saw those bad days as not bad days, but actually God preparing him for something bigger. And of course, he the story. He goes on to kill Goliath, and then that catapults him to something even greater, eventually becoming the king of the Israelites. And so David and Goliath is a great story of how God had prepared him along the way. And it's the same thing for you, same thing for me, that somehow God's been working in our lives to prepare us, that at some point we would talk to each other here in this interview. And but not just us, it's God's working in everybody's life, I believe. And to prepare them for something that's actually greater than what they, sometimes we give ourselves credit. And oftentimes, and again, our enemy working against us, we look at the bad days, the hard things that we've gone through, not as so much God preparing us for something greater, but we look at those more in the negative sense, like, woe is me, and I'm not that because I barely survived these situations. And so sometimes, being able to shift our thought process, being able to really have our eyes fixed on Jesus. We talked about that. Have our eyes fixed on God can help us to work through challenging times and help us to get beyond and to push through. And then, when we you talked about attributes, when we're helping somebody, with their resume, let's say. A lot of times, young people or even older people too, for that matter, will put together a resume, and it's just a list of tasks. I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that for these employers. And what we really try to do is to help come alive in the resume is it's not just the tasks; those are important. It's important to add, monetary value. If you were able to shift sales upward, or if you were able to make more money and make your previous employer put them in a better position, those are all great things. But also the godly attributes of I really took concern with my customer. I really tried to do really invested in my customer or my client to help them do better. We can help those things come alive in their resume or in an interview. Those are all very godly attributes. Those are all very biblical attributes. And what employer doesn't want a young man or woman to, who cares for their client, to come and work for them? And as you said, a lot of times the skill set follows along. But if we just have the right mentality going into it, a lot of employers can work with the skill set, but if they need the right mentality first. And so, but David and Goliath, it's a great story of that is very applicable. It's sometimes we just stop at, wow, it's inspiring. Got this young kid who threw a rock at the big guy, and he kills him, and we kind of stop short at that. But there's actually a lot of lessons of the things that David was fighting against. Even his brothers who were giving him a hard time. Yes, it's his own brothers that are there. They're giving him a hard time. and sometimes it's the people that are closest to us that we feel don't believe in us. We feel like that give us a hard time in one way or another. David had that same thing, and what you tried to bring to life in the book, and have it more be applicable to our lives today.
And Saul tried to put his armor on David, and it's a great lesson in I can't be you.
Right.
I have to be me. And
Right.
when we're evaluating, we can compare notes, we can talk about our approaches, but in reality is I'm me, and God created me to do certain things. And so to find out what that is, to inventory those, you have a great number of tools in helping somebody identify what their personal brand is and their identity in Messiah, and how to present that to a future employer. Unfortunately,
and Rabbi,
we've run out
if I could
of
interject,
time.
you're exactly right how God makes us, but makes us incredible people.
Yes.
Not only just physically, but it's our spirit, it's our first of all our bodies and our hands, our minds. I mean, that's all like totally incredible of how that all works. But I think sometimes we underestimate of exactly what God has done, not just in our physical bodies, but helping us to develop who we are. And I even wrote in the book that the story of creation continues. That I don't know how many women are out there that are pregnant right now, but inside each one of them, God is piecing together an incredible being that has a chance to be an incredible story for God.
Amen.
And
we've
so,
run out
anyway,
of time. Right, we've run out of time. It's been great talking with you, and look forward to seeing the great success for Launch Your Life, Creating a Life in Service to God by Philip and Elizabeth Bruns. You can visit ignitenationcom, click on Philip's name, and it'll take you right to a link to the book, and order a copy for yourself. Make it a part of your life, a part of your small group, maybe even put together a career mentoring group using this plan within your church, helping young and old find direction, find purpose, and find new meaning in service to God. Philip, please give our best to Beth and thank her for her contribution to this great work. It's been a blessing to have you on the program with us. Thank you.
Rabbi, I couldn't thank you enough for having me. Thank you so much.
God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.